you've got to validate, and revalidate every step of the way. Because the minute that AI generates a report that contradicts the expert who knows what the right answer is, and the AI tells me to do the wrong thing, the trust immediately starts to degrade.
If we just build all this crazy stuff and it's doing all these amazing things, and let's say it is even accurate, if they can't maintain the solution and trust it on an ongoing basis that their organization can actually keep up with more innovation, then I don't see the platform implementations being successful.
And then you can start talking about AI, right? Then you can start talking about like really leveraging AI, because now you've been through this whole journey where you can trust the data, you can trust the platform to do the work, you can kind of take it to the next level.
Convincing them and winning their trust by saying, your life is going to be so much better when this thing works.
Today, like, it feels like the attack vectors are just compounding. You know, last week, I don't know if you saw the news in NPM, there were these supply chain attacks whereby there were these scripts, post-install scripts that like went out and were like searching the user system for sensitive credentials or, crypto wallet information. And then they would like exfil that data out to a server, and then they would continue their attack vector, based on the information that they got. Open source is just this massive issue. And at least in Foundry, like when I'm working with open source, at least the internet's off by default, at least they have like some interesting protections they're putting in place on my behalf.
Security is hard. And if you don't know just at least a little bit about security and what to watch out for, and you wipe code an app and you put it in production, you're probably going to get hacked.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Code and Connor podcast. My name is Connor Deeks, CEO of CodeStrap, and I'm joined, as always, with the original CodeStrap himself and CTO, Dorian Smiley. We're going to be bringing you guys the latest and greatest around Palantir, the tech, the company, the community. We'll also be discussing insights on other companies, things happening in the world of AI, of data, of consulting, of investing, and any meaningful topic that requires attention. The focus of today's episode is trust, security, and success in an AI world. We're joined today by the Foxtrot leadership team. Martin Seebach, Foxtrot CTO, is a proven tech leader with 11 years of experience at Palantir, rising through the ranks of 4 deployed engineering roles to lead architect. He's trusted by global clients, and now as Foxtrot CTO, he leverages his deep subject matter expertise and experience in the field to lead a growing team of Foxtrot FDEs. Christine Williams, Foxtrot co-CEO, is a proven founder and trusted advisor to C-suites worldwide with deep expertise in business development, market expansion, and value creation. Her experience spans leading national security missions at the Pentagon to driving Fortune 500 growth strategies and scaling enterprise solutions at Palantir. And finally, Nicole Sanders, Foxtrot's other co-CEO, is a seasoned leader with a career spanning Lockheed Martin and Palantir, who brings a proven track record of building enterprises from the ground up, leading multi-billion-dollar defense captures, and shaping strategic roadmaps that deliver sustained growth and impact. Martin, Christine, Nicole, welcome to Code and Connor.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Great to be here, guys.
Welcome.
Awesome.
Great having you.
All right, first topic on the docket is the AI buyers. While most technology pushes in the past were driven by technology functions in enterprise, the push for Palantir Foundry and now AIP is predominantly being brought in by the business side. Why is that? And I'll kick it over to you guys to discuss.
Yeah, no, this is near and dear to our hearts. So I think we're working a lot of the time with large enterprise customers who are facing some really intense challenges in terms of digital modernization. And so we're consistently faced with this question of, how do I leverage AI? How do I bring AI into my organization? What does that look like? And so, we really are taking the time to connect and partner with our customers and really kind of dig into what that looks like. So a lot of the time, what we're learning is that, the business areas are really contending with, how do they create efficiencies? How do they leverage the data they have to really kind of scale quickly? And so what we're doing is creating these conversations and having these incredible conversations with our customers on the business side to kind of distill what that looks like.
Do you think that like the push for AI or this new tech has basically just been the spark that was needed to actually get data in order on the business side?
I think so. especially because the technology, I mean, we all know it's the most prolific technology platform ever adopted, in the history of the world. So all these people are leveraging this technology in their day-to-day lives, and they picked it up literally overnight. So they bring that to work, and they're trying to figure out, how do I use this in a workplace context? And every time that there's a pilot or an attempt or an MVP or a proof of concept, the first question they're faced with is, well, what data are you using? What systems are you using? What constructs are you using? What platforms are you using to enable this pilot, this MVP, this concept? And so they're having to look in the mirror and figure out, well, maybe they know, maybe they have a data lake, maybe they have a data warehouse, maybe they've begun their data journey, but they haven't fully digitally transformed. Perhaps they're sitting with 20 different legacy ERPs because their company was built through mergers and acquisitions over the past 3 decades. So I do think so, Connor, that's sort of the forcing function to look at the data landscape and see, is it ready for me to do this?
Would you characterize it as like more of a bottoms up thing on the business side, where like the directors and operators are pushing for a better solution, or does it come top down from like the CEO? How would you
I mean,
describe it?
it's probably a little of both, and I'm sure Martin has an opinion on this too. But it's a little of both. We certainly, I think, there's sort of a middle management also that's trying to figure out how to create efficiencies, and they're getting pressure from the top on like, let's improve our ROI on this, or let's get our greater efficiencies, and how do we do that? And so, there's this balance between proving that out, but then also being able to work with the people that are actually using the data in a way that, this sort of melding together of the drivers that are actually encouraging them to adopt and leverage, Foundry, and then leverage AI. But I think what's really interesting is that the push for AI, I feel like, is definitely coming from the top. Guys, we got to use AI. We got to get on this race. Like, where are we? Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we using AI? And so I think there's a big discussion about, what does that actually mean? And how can I actually, create these efficiencies? And so conversations with our customers can often be, what are rules-based decision versus leveraging AI? And how do you kind of distill the difference? I see Martin nodding, so I'm sure he has some thoughts here as
Yeah,
well.
no, I mean, I kind of want to add some colors to that, which is draw a slightly longer historical arc here, which is, the present kind of AI boom has definitely exploded in a lot of ways, but I think it's also like a generational thing, right? I'm just old enough that back when I was in school and so on, normal people didn't even have email addresses. And then when they did, it was a work email or school email, something like that. The idea that you would have a Gmail, for example, that as a kind of completely standard thing, that's a relatively new thing. I think Gmail launched like 2004, something like that, right? So you have a generation of people who came into business and rose through the ranks, who are kind of popular term digital natives, but also more practically, they're just people who grew up with like something like Gmail, Facebook, Instagram, the iPhone, and so on. And they come to work, and they're looking at an ERP system that looks like something you need to use a floppy disk to boot up. And they're like, why is this my life? This can't be it. And that also kind of just drives a natural desire to say, maybe we can do just a little bit better here. And I think even pre-AI, Foundry really leaned into that in a lot of ways. I remember seeing a tool from one of the big ERP producers, which was kind of their low-code application builder. I just tried to Google it. I can't find it now. But anyway, I remember the tagline was not enterprise-grade software, but consumer-grade interfaces. Right. So now suddenly you're not selling enterprise something as being the good thing. You're selling consumer grade to enterprises as being the thing they actually need. I just felt like that was an illustration of that point.
Yeah, I think we always talk a lot about the sort of challenges that these companies have around a central IT function that's meant to service the technology, needs of the business. And often those things are in conflict with one another. Like IT is a risk management center. It's not necessarily the place where you go to innovate all the time, because they're more concerned with like, oh, well, if we do X and we bring in system Y, what does that do to the risk profile, and how much additional work is that? And they're really, if they would disaggregate the technology function from the IT function, you might start getting to better outcomes so that people aren't coming to work using those systems that look like, it needs a floppy disk or whatever. And you're like crying because you have to use this. And then you look at like the net promoter scores of a lot of those systems, and they are just in the toilet. And
But
your
terrible.
point around like bringing that consumer experience to enterprise it definitely resonates with me. And it's one of those things that you can see it in the morale of people when they have to interact with these broken, legacy systems. But it's interesting to think that maybe the business, Palantir has this momentum with the business. If they can capture it at the C-suite level, the CEO level, maybe they have an opportunity to put pressure on the central IT function and make the case to disaggregate and distribute that function, into the business.
Well, I think boot camps too from Palantir, like obviously Palantir did strike gold, like you said, Dorian, with focused as their ICPs being the business, but forward deployed engineering was, encapsulated in those boot camps where you get a business audience in a room, unpack what their problem statement is, and then build the software exactly to spec to solve the business problem. And then it put tools in front of the business operators that they could readily adopt, right? They're not having to learn floppy disk installed software from the 1990s with user interfaces that befuddle the mind as to when you click a button and then you have a drop down of options that lead to a drop down of options, or that everything gets generated into an Excel based output, which is, extraordinarily inefficient, but mind numbingly boring. That ability to have the empathy for the business operator that then gives them the solution to their problem in a room was really powerful. So I think that experience allows the business to say, I want that, and I want the experience that I'm seeing other people have, and kind of steamroll IT, who's trying to maybe hold them back a bit.
You're speaking our language. I mean, 100%. The sort of FDE model that Palantir originated, where going in and actually working with the users is something that we do kind of in spades, right? So we go in there and really get to know them, but then creating that long-term partnership where you are sitting next to them and you're figuring out their problems together and really driving towards that user adoption is just, it's so valuable. It's so, I mean, you really see the kind of transformation happening, the digital transformation happening within these organizations once the users actually start to see the outcomes and the impact. And so sticking around, being there for that long journey with them, we've been around for almost 2 years now. And so we're really seeing that kind of user adoption really translating into a complete enterprise appreciation of what the software can do.
Yeah, it's the first. So Palantir themselves and now the consultancies around them for deployed engineering in general is the first group of service providers I've ever heard in an entire career of consulting say we want to partner with our customers.
Yeah.
Software companies just want you to buy their stuff, and then
That's changing, right? Like OpenAI now has adopted the forward deployed engineer title. They actually offer a forward deployed engineering service. I would bet money Salesforce gets in on this game.
Yeah.
See, everyone now is kind of trying to find a way to offer forward deployed engineering services, which is kind of funny.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the fast followers, right? On what's working.
Right.
But shocking, the idea of actually partnering with the person that's going to both buy your product and buy your services. It obviously feels intuitive now, but for years that was not the case, right?
It was hated. It was hated for years. I think every conversation Palantir had at the early stages about that model with investors was like, no, you're not. We're not investing in that. That's crazy.
So I contrast it with, coming from the large corporate background that I had, where digital transformation programs that are half decade long studies, I don't even know how much money, but they're trying to solve every problem all at once in this massive program. And that's one of the things that I think I learned the most when I arrived at Palantir is, wow, you really can do this radically differently, and you really can get good results. You really don't have to be, doing the thing for all people. Solving one problem, a very valuable problem, one at a time, creates immense value and compounding value. It's one of those things that, other organizations may try to imitate and they may try to adopt, but it's harder than it looks from the outside.
Yeah, a report came out yesterday. I think it was ex-Palantirians. We'll share it in the link in the the video, but on like defining what a forward deployed engineer is and like all the steps that you have to embody to actually deploy it. Because otherwise, if you don't fully, ingratiate yourself with the concept of forward deployed engineering, you basically are just the same as every other consultant.
Yep.
Yeah.
On the forward deployed engineering side, what I've found in my personal experience was that it was heavily tech focused, in the sense that like you're working with a representative from the business, but that representative is defining their problem set, but that problem set may not be the full problem set for the business. It's like it's focused on an area that's relevant to them, but it may not align necessarily with the full goals of the business or the challenges that they're facing. And if you take the traditional consulting role and you were to find a way to align business objectives with the forward deployed engineering teams, the traditional consulting role, and Connor, you know this from our experience at Big Four, where we essentially were like, hey, if you guys would just partner with the forward deployed engineers in such a way that you could find those, like explain to them the high value levers to pull on that the business actually cares about, this process works 10 times better. We get to outcomes 10 times faster. And guess what? You actually codify the consultant knowledge about, the models and levers that will deliver business outcomes into a software system, which is also really cool. So I think there's still a lot of growth potential here in the FDE model and like what it could encompass.
I think what you just said about the kind of like consolidate that into the product, I think that's an incredibly important thing. It would be wrong to say that the forward deployed engineering model also hasn't evolved over time. And I think one of the things that Shyam Sankar, the CTO of Palantir, has kind of said about the forward deployed engineering and Palantir in general is that Palantir builds in the field, and right, that's the purpose of the forward deployed engineer. It's not just to configure the product for the customer in a kind of a consulting way. It's actually Palantir being in the field, building the product that the customer needs. And the only way to do that is to sit next to them while they are experiencing the pain points that they have. And I think that way of building Palantir, both Palantir Gotham and Palantir Foundry, permeates those products. And of course, that permeates the culture around the people who would deploy those products, hence forward deployed engineering. Obviously, we're not in a position to actually build the Palantir product in the field, but we kind of like still try to permeate some of that secret sauce to deploy the products really well. But like 10 years ago, the role of the forward deployed engineer was also like hammer the, I'm not supposed to swear on a podcast, but hammer the thing into shape so that it would work for the client's purposes, and then come back to the sender, bring some of those experiences, some of that pain. Shyam also has some very colorful things to say about forward deployed engineers as they relate to pain, and take some of that pain and put it into the product, and that's kind of what became both Gotham and Foundry. Other companies that are like kind of joining this forward deployed engineering model, they're not doing that, right? They're companies that have a relatively well-defined, relatively mature product. They just want to get better at selling it. I'm not saying that's a bad idea, but it is a fundamentally different thing.
I'm interested in this role that the forward deployed engineers played at Palantir with the product teams, and like how they would deliver feedback and sort of do the debrief at the end of the engagements, and then try to find the essence of what that solution was and decide if it should go into like additional product features. I kind of feel like there's this opportunity for organizations like yours now, where because Foundry has marketplace, because you can build like product solutions that you can distribute and run on top of Foundry. Are you also thinking about like building product teams internally where you take the FDE experience that's being, harvested in a particular sector or line of business, and then productizing that, like putting that into something that's an accelerator for future engagements?
That's definitely something we're looking at, and it's a very exciting possibility to lean into. I think the core challenge there is that the kinds of companies that have Foundry, certainly at a certain scale, there are companies that are large and complex in their own way. If you're running a Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 company, your supply chain doesn't look like the other Fortune 500 supply chains. And to the extent it does, you go and buy an off-the-shelf product. You get SAP, and SAP is excellent, by the way, for these kind of core operational things. So I think the challenge will that, and I hope we can overcome it because it's a very exciting opportunity. But the challenge with that is that people are in Foundry, people are building in Foundry because there isn't an off-the-shelf product that does what they need to do. And if there was, they would just buy it. I mean, nobody wants to do this in Foundry. It's not a goal in itself to be building custom in Foundry. You're not gonna replace your email, right? Use Outlook, great, right? Nobody's gonna build email for Foundry. That would be weird. So the things we actually end up building in Foundry are the things that aren't like very good off the shelf options for, because it's a singular thing. And even when a use case has the same headline between two clients, when we actually just go just below the surface, they really quite very differently, because they're just different challenges, even though it's a supply chain on the top. So I think that's another thing, and that goes to the power of Foundry as well, is that it makes it relatively easy to build these things, which of course is amazing.
I think what we're seeing, even with SAP, fine, it's a good product. I'd argue differently, but SAP, or in the supply chain context, Blue Yonder, Era Systems, and the list goes on and on. None of these things ever are out of the box. SAP or an ERP takes years to implement. And when you actually look under the hood, the complexity of the customization is such that what you actually bought isn't even really what you have under the hood. So I think we've proven that you can't really mold your business to a software's definition of supply chain or whatever. You have to mold the software to the business. And then Palantir's Foundry obviously just gives you like the accelerant to do that really quickly and successfully. And I think that's for the audience. They need to know that, like, when you buy Blue Yonder or Kinaxis or any of these solutions, they might be good. I'm not saying they're not well-made products, is that you are going to go through an implementation journey that is likely much longer than you are originally being told.
And there are a suite or a cohort of startups being founded on Foundry as the platform today that are software companies. Yeah. So like, I think there is Foundry as a platform. You could make the case that there are a lot of these systems that you mentioned, like SAP and that Connor mentioned, are meant to run on hyperscalers. Like the platform is the hyperscaler. I could see replatforming on Foundry in particular, because what those systems we're talking about do is they effectively create data silos in which, like in Salesforce, I can get the demand signal, but I can't get the supply signal. In SAP, I can get the supply signal, but I can't get the freaking demand signal, and like, so it's like, you can't make an actual operational decision on what to do, because then you got to go across these systems. Right. And so if you replatform on something like Foundry, you could actually design a system that does unify these workflows, because it can get the full ontology of the business and understands, all of the data, make these operational decisions. So I think like there's this emerging role as Foundry as a platform, and you're seeing the early startup cohorts, and then they're pushed towards making marketplace better. Like, I know that, I don't know if I'm supposed to say how many people are on the marketplace team now, but I know that it's a lot more than there's been in the past. And letters have gone out to say how important marketplace is for their future. So I think there is this role as a platform. I do agree that it's extremely challenging, because every business is their own unique snowflake in how they think about these processes. And like, how do you engineer for that? That is extremely hard to do, where you have like a core set of software functions that then need to be customized. Maybe they're 70% complete or 50% complete, but you've got to go into the customer and then completely mold it to the way they actually work. That's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the keys is figuring out what are the right accelerators of products to build, and we're on that journey right now. You learn a lot every time you help another client with their implementation, and startups that are starting fresh with no tech debt. And there's an opportunity there to do a lot of templatizing and marketplace-like applications. But like Martin said, the large legacy companies, their tech debt is complicated, their landscape is complicated, and you can get efficient at integrating with that. But I think we're a ways away from automating that level of integration and automating away that complexity. The important thing, I think, also is, while you can get to value quickly, and perhaps you're working within a part of the organization where there's a subset of that tech debt, of the legacy tech systems, and you can get quickly to an MVP put an application in the hands of users. It's built in AIP and Foundry, and it works. But also knowing that you've got to plan for the integration of the full tech stack into your Foundry, and you've got to make sure that your organization's got the resources lined up, both from a capital standpoint and human standpoint. Everybody's behind it and recognizes that, yes, Foundry is a platform that enables all these things to fuse together and integrate and make amazing data-driven decisions and infuse AI into your organization in a way that no other platform can do. But you still have to do the hard work of integration. You've got to be ready for that. The more complicated your tech stack is, the longer that's going to take. And you've got to validate, and revalidate every step of the way. Because the minute that AI generates a report that contradicts the expert who knows what the right answer is, and the AI tells me to do the wrong thing, the trust immediately starts to degrade. So that is a process also that I think Foundry accelerates, but you still have to go through it.
That really points to trust, right? Like, and relationship management being a key aspect of forward deployed engineering. Like, Connor, you could, this is Connor's domain more than mine. I'm more like the tech person that is sitting there trying to figure out solutions. But like, what we often see is like a good FDE team builds trust with the business and continually maintains that relationship. They're just as good at that as the engineering side.
Well, yeah, I think they need to start maybe focusing as well, like the barriers of just breaking down the door and making sure the business is the only person you're taking care of and just saying IT, you can go screw off, needs to kind of come down to, you got to build trust in two directions. Because like when FDEs come in, what we've seen, and FDEs being from Palantir or from Foxtrot or others, not that it's a judgment on you, just to be clear, this is more macro statement, is that we're moving so fast to solve these problem statements with the business that we're leaving a giant wake behind us that like the customer can't themselves actually maintain the solution. And so then you get to what you said, Nicole, is like you get to the point where then the AI recommendation or even something in an application in workshop is contradicting what the SME can say that is the accurate answer, or that they can trust the output. So we're almost like we're moving so fast because we're so capable in platform now that like maybe we're foregoing the trust with the speed. And I think a lot of that is just making sure that internal operators, whether they're in a technology role, they're a developer, or that they're the business subject matter expert or operator, that they get brought along the journey and understand how you configured the software, even if they can't then do it themselves right away. But if we just build all this crazy stuff and it's doing all these amazing things, and let's say it is even accurate, if they can't maintain the solution and trust it on an ongoing basis that their organization can actually keep up with more innovation, then I don't see the platform implementations being successful, because after a while people are just going to say, no one inside our four walls can actually maintain this. Why would we keep paying for it if we have to continue to outsource our mission to external parties?
100%. I mean, I think, you're really describing a lot of kind of the pain points that our customers talk about is, I know this platform is going to be transformative, but I can't really convince my SMEs yet. We've had data issues. We're concerned about things. They're still using their spreadsheets. So I think, really pausing to understand what those pain points are, really pausing to understand where the concerns are, where some of the messy data might be that we can help them resolve is, this incredible journey that we're on with our customers, and just kind of slowing down, taking the time to really do that. I mean, we've seen that with so many of our large enterprise customers, is getting to know them, understanding, helping sort of, again, this partnership, right, of working alongside them in the platform so they can understand and see, where the changes are being made, why things are being refactored, why, this data source may not be quite optimal, and how to fix that. This kind of slow process is what really is earning that user adoption and really creating that kind of belief into the platform and starting to trust it. And then you can start talking about AI, right? Then you can start talking about like really leveraging AI, because now you've been through this whole journey where you can trust the data, you can trust the platform to do the work, you can kind of take it to the next level.
If I can kind of add a little bit of a kind of a historical background to that as well, I think there's some interesting changes, because again, when Palantir kind of pioneered this model 10, 15, almost 20 years ago, the model was very much kind of sneaking in on the ground floor, and you had to kind of fight door to door, win the trust of individuals to get them to even give you a little bit of data, get them to let you show what you can do with that data, and so on. And so that's kind of what you alluded to before, that that was very much part of the FDE job, because you had to actually, I mean, Palantir had this kind of like, not being a very militaristic company, but having just a little bit of like militaristic language. So this kind of fighting from door to door, right? To win like individual users' trust, and then win them so much that they go to their bosses and say, I need this, I cannot do my job without this thing. And that kind of has then reversed a little bit as Palantir has become more successful, which is of course a good thing. But it now means that Palantir is coming in not just through the front door, but well, I guess you can't come in through the CEO suite, but you're really coming in from the top floor now, and that changes the flavor of the challenge, because there is a significant risk of skipping some of the trust steps when you come in with the CEO in your back saying, hey, this guy's going to fix AI for you in the organization, do everything he says, right? It's not literally how it happens, but it's closer to that than the other mode was. And then combined with the fact that the platform is really quite capable, you can do a lot very, very quickly, plus commercial pressures to do a lot very, very quickly. I think that has ended up in a somewhat unhealthy equilibrium, hopefully not equilibrium, but somewhat unhealthy balance, where things are being done just slightly too quickly and skipping some of the softer steps along the way.
Hey guys, this is Connor from the Code and Connor podcast. I hope you're enjoying the episode. I want to make sure you know about the first ever Palantir user conference, FutureOps. It's in Dallas, Texas from October 22nd and 23rd. If you are a Palantir user, a company that invests in Palantir technologies, investors that follow the companies that serve in this ecosystem, or investors that follow Palantir, you absolutely have to be at this event. It's going to be a fun time. We're going to learn a lot. We're going to see amazing applications of the technology, and we'll trade ideas and network. We hope to see you there. So let's pivot here with that. Like, one, I want to talk about AI success stories, but then in the context of some anecdotes, how do we help companies get to those same successes? How do we help them with obviously the technology approaches, but also maybe some of the structural things? If we can touch on governance and security as well, that'll provide our audience some pathways to at least latch onto that aren't strictly driven by the AIP con stage. Maybe we get a bit more gritty with it in the stories.
Yeah, I mean, I have a story that Martin can lean in on some of the more technical details and under the hood sort of work that was done, but think about a global manufacturer that's built its business via acquisition over 20 or 30 years. ERP landscape is as diverse as it could be. Every single one of those acquisitions had a different ERP, and that persists till today. And they want to be able to understand their inventory. It's a very vertically integrated company. You want to be able to see their inventory both in state and in transit today, and also in a predictive way into the future. And there was some pressure to, for the executives, right? They need to see something on a screen showing their stuff, where it is, very quickly. 2 months, show me. And so our team went on that journey, and very much focused on one plant, and it's sort of vertically integrated, like sister plants, if you will. Wasn't perfect, but was accurate for one location and a reasonable user interface. And I said, oh, I can see, and I'm building a little bit of trust because I can see, right? So the seeing and the trust and the front end really go hand in hand. Even though 98% of the work is all on the back end and the data and the ontologies, and Martin, you talk about the security and governance, then spend another couple of months really fine-tuning that, locking that in, and validating it, right? Validating with every single person that's doing this the old way with their spreadsheets every day for weeks, finding the problems, fixing a pipeline, fixing an integration, deduplicating data, iterating, validating with users. So you get to the point where it's really working for one plan. So you've gone from MVP to like production, but production in a portion of the operation. Now you have a plan for, 1 month at a time, bring on my next plant. Now you're validating, training, documenting, rinse and repeat. And you're there for that because you need to cover a global operation. You need to be there for that whole cycle, both, doing the back end engineering work, but building the trust at the same time. And I don't know if Martin wants to add anything on the nitty gritty engineering behind all that.
Yeah, no, actually not so much in the engineering, but more on the trust side. Because I think when push comes to shove, if I was to go, be a guest lecturer in the CS course and talk about the engineering we did, people would kind of like look at me weird and say like, "What? Why is this hard?" Because the actual kind of like lines of code on the screen on the keyboard, not rocket science. The rocket science was figuring out what those lines should be, what are the things we're doing, and actually going and winning that trust. And like, okay, God, we have some wind in our back, which is that the executives want that. So we can kind of like, we get the introduction, we get to talk to the people, right? The way we get those people to talk back to us, if you will, at the frequency, dedicate the time, because they're busy, everybody's busy. The way we get them to dedicate the time to actually sit day after day after day and go through these spreadsheets with us is by convincing them and winning their trust by saying, your life is going to be so much better when this thing works. That's an art, right? That's not engineering. Well, it's also engineering, but it's not computer science.
We see a lot of clients who say, hey, I want an operating system for my whole supply chain. But then if you even go peel the onion back one layer, you're like, okay, well, do you know what your inventory balances are across your sites? Like, no, we don't. And in fact, the only thing that really ever comes together, which is a testament to that profession, is the financial records, the accounting. And it only happens like maybe once a month. But if that one layer back, you're like, well, do you know your inventory? No, because we have 25 ERPs and 57 inventory management systems. Just to bring that level of clarity, a single source of truth, to then be able to see that as one of many individual steps you need to start taking to get to something like an operating system for your supply chain. But man, those are hard yards, right? To build the trust, the validation, to get people out of Excel spreadsheets, which are almost exclusively never just a data dump. It's a data dump, then 50 pivot tables, then 100 validations or reconciliations, then crazy logic that's hidden inside individual formulas in Excel. Unpacking that and getting them to adopt a new way of working with a unified data set is a profound leap. So it's a great story.
A client I was working with, one of these very, very standard use cases is that they have a spreadsheet like exactly like you just described, but they want then Foundry instead, so as a live data and so on. So we got a copy of the spreadsheet. We went through, we looked at the formulas and the data, and we pulled the data, put together, and all that good stuff, and we replicated the calculations, except the numbers were off by a little. Usually they're off by a lot if you've done something wrong, but they were off by a very little amount. And we spent a weekend, and it was out of passion, by the way. It wasn't kind of anybody screaming at us to spend the weekend. We were just like really frustrated and couldn't figure out what was going on here. We spent a weekend, we were combing through this. We found the rows that didn't line up, and we were like, what's going on here? We came back to them on the Monday, and they were like, look at us, like, oh yeah, after downloading the data, Hexa goes in and updates something because they're wrong.
Oh,
Of course. Yeah, I mean, I think there's, it's fascinating because there are so many steps in the process, right? Like, it's not about building an MVP. It's not about like, here's our data set. How can we, design a workflow and build? It's finding out who the stakeholders are. Like step one, is it who are the users? Who are the advocates? Who are the champions? Who's hands on keys? Who's making decisions? You got to get all those people in a room, and often they're not even in a room to begin with. You're missing 3 or 4 people that are critical to this. So getting all those people in the room, helping the customer really understand like the critical stakeholders that need to be there, then scoping, right? Like, what are you trying to achieve here? What do you, and that, that's a really in-depth conversation. What are you trying to achieve? What are your outcomes? Where are you now? Where do you want to be? What is your final end goal? Scoping it out. Then it's identifying who the team is to do this. Is this a highly technical team? Is it a technical team with somebody who's got that supply chain experience, who can bring in lessons learned? That's often what we do is, bring in a SME that has done this at a supply chain, at a company focusing on supply chain, bringing that SME in and giving some kind of, lessons learned that they can apply. Then, working with these kind of different components, different people to start to build out what that workflow looks like, what are the data sources, how to bring in the data. Then you get into data science, right? Like, what do you do with this data? What's the most optimal way to leverage this data? So bringing in that kind of data scientist or the data science expertise, getting in there, building the pipelines, developing the workflow, sitting down with the users, like we talked about, testing it out, validate. Does this work? Does this suck? Does it make sense? Does this dashboard look like something that is illogical? Or how can we adapt that? So all these pieces in place to where you get to that final point of, I am more efficient. Look at the ROI. Look at what I'm able to save money on. So many different steps to kind of get there, rather than just like quickly kind of building something. We love demos. Demos are awesome. When I was at Palantir, like gave demos all day long, loved it. But then how do you turn that demo into that usable piece? It's just so many different steps.
Well, and a story on that front recently, we were wrapping up delivery for a client, and we'd gone through the whole process Christine just laid out. You're kind of at the button-up phase, documenting training, getting ready to hand it over. And then two users who had sort of disengaged from the process showed up. Or like, well, actually, this is great, but we really need this. And, put us in, if we surged, we delivered for them. But that's kind of brings back that engagement and that trust. And, even if somebody, people are busy, that is one of the number one challenges in getting this right. And just making sure that people who may have an important role don't disappear and then reappear later. You've got to keep that engagement. That's definitely part of the art of doing this.
This is all really interesting success stories on the build side. I would say there's the other side, which is the sort of maintain and sustain side of the solution. And that's that wake that like Connor was talking about.
Yeah.
But like what we found that works, at least in our experience, is a way to help bridge that gap from the people who are building the thing, from the people who need to maintain and sustain the thing, is just pair programming. Like the people who are meant to maintain the thing often don't know Foundry. They might be new to the platform. You're missing out on a really valuable learning experience by just embedding those people with the build team. And so they can like ride shotgun and see how this thing is being built. And every freaking time, I swear, these at a customer, the sustain and maintain people come in after the thing's built.
Yeah.
And now you're supposed to absorb 2 years of build or something in 6 weeks. That just doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, the branding is hypercare. We've talked about this on another episode, but what a crock of shit that concept is.
2 years of build in the.
Yeah, you got to be building it.
It has to be part of it. And then, our customers are like, how do we apply training into this? How do we train our people so that when you leave, we'll be able to, take over the platform? So helping them understand exactly what it looks like from a, like you said, very integrated environment to be trained while we're building. So it makes sense. And so that sort of embedded, feature is so important. Because if you walk away and then all of a sudden they try to pick it up, it doesn't work.
And we've been on the receiving end of hypercare a number of times. It's part of what we do, right? We're here for it. We understand it's different every time and every circumstance. And if trying to think of a good example of, where we've, there sometimes the things are built and then delivered and then turned over, whether it's the Foxtrot or an internal team or a blend of Foxtrot internal team or someone else. And they're built for purpose for, the circumstances of the day. But now we're fast forward, things move fast, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months later, the circumstances of the day have changed. Now the platform needs to go, to this other thing, or especially if it's an ecosystem product. Right now, the ecosystem has changed, and now you've got third parties who are participating in this as customers of kind of the Foundry client. and they've got their unique requirements and the way they want to participate, and the way they want their data treated as part of this ecosystem. And you've got to do some re-architecting of the ontology. The ontology isn't set and finite. It's a living thing. And definitely I'm not the expert to talk about ontologies, but we have seen this, as we get things turned over to us, they need to constantly evolve and change. And sometimes that takes time, and it can be frustrating because when you're working on the ontology, so it can enable these outcomes that you're achieving now, they're different than perhaps the ones you were trying to achieve before. You're not seeing a lot of front end progress. You're not getting that eye candy. You're not getting that satisfaction of like the new dashboard or the new application, because you're doing this under the hood work that is so necessary. And it can be a little bit frustrating for customers because they want to see, show me. It's hard to show them, the value of the ontology evolving.
One model that we've heard discussed, which is pretty interesting, I was talking to somebody about this recently, is sort of the legal counsel. So, you start out, you're a developing company, you hire external counsel to like build the thing, like build my legal team, build my business. I don't know how to do this. And then they do that. And then you hire your in-house counsel, like your first person. And then they start to do some of that themselves. And the external counsel can leave, but they don't go away, right? They're on call for those major important points. So having that sort of long-term relationship with our customers where, we kind of wean them off and they start to adopt some of this themselves, but maintaining that trust and that connection so they knew who to call when they're ready to build more workflows or when they're, needing some changes or bringing in new data sources. So I think that's an interesting kind of construct.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is Palantir has always referred to its customers as partners,
Yeah.
and it's like, I think that's the right mindset, is like, you are partners, like, shouldn't be like, oh, you're a customer, I'm going to just do a financial exchange with you. It's like, no, I'm here for the long run to make sure you continually leverage this technology to improve your business. So I think that is the right mindset to have for sure.
You create these deep-rooted relationships. You are like working on some serious stuff that matters to these organizations. So, I mean, the partnership is not just a label. It really is, I think, how you feel. You're involved in, decisions that can impact the entire business, that you can feel their stress, that our first calls with every customer, you can feel their stress. They're really trying to figure out how to make this work and how to create these optimizations. And so the partnership thing is, it's no joke. Like, it really is this connected relationship, which is pretty cool.
So we talked a lot about like the sort of build side, business side, building these relationships, what works, and so the successes that we're seeing. I feel like with AI, there's this existing dimension of sort of like governance, observability, and security that also is important, because if you can't trust the platform, or you can't trust the people using it because the right security protocols aren't in place, or you don't have provenance of data, that's problematic in its own right. But now you've got AI thrown in there, which adds this whole new dimension to the security and trust and observability problem. Now you got to audit inferences done by the models. You have to know why the models reached the decisions they did. Did they access data under the right security permissions? Like, all these new things, and Palantir feels like it's way out ahead in this. This is why we chose it as a platform. We also think it's a key reason customers are going from pilot to production in Palantir, and where others are getting stalled out because they never thought about security. There's like, wait a minute. Oh, I didn't think about that. I thought this was a neat visual business process modeling tool with AI capabilities. I didn't know that I need to answer all these security questions. But from your perspectives, how are you seeing the security challenge? Is Palantir an accelerator here? Are you able to build trust with the security folks of the business that this is a viable solution in production? Be interested to hear your thoughts there.
I mean, I know Martin has a lot of thoughts, but I will just say one thing. I come from the intelligence community, and that is Palantir's first place where they started the business. So with that sort of trust that they have with the intelligence community, the government, international intelligence communities, I think speaks to the fact that they have invested tens of millions more in the security of the platform. And so from a sort of selling point to the customers, it's pretty easy that trust is inherently built in. I mean, that the U.S. Army, like their entire data platform rests on Vantage. So I think that, that story is easy to tell, but in terms of the, nuts and bolts of government, I'm going to hand that over to Martin. I mean, it's certainly such an incredible story to be told there.
Yeah, no, I mean, we had a project with a client just quite recently that involved transforming some unstructured data using an LLM, and this is very sensitive data. And the transformation step would then kind of like make some derivation of that data that was less sensitive. I don't know if it's a particular classic use case of an LLM, but it's certainly someone that makes a lot of sense in this case. And this particular client, they were going on and on about this off-the-shelf product that exists in the market that is supposed to be able to do this. And I mean, I read a little bit about it, and it looks like it does it well. We kind of like, as proof of concept, just build it out in Foundry for them, and you could like almost see the penny drop for them. It's like, it's not actually about the model doing the transformation. I mean, that's hard enough, that's interesting enough, but in the bigger scheme of things, that's table stakes, because the thing that was important here was making sure that only the people who can see the unprocessed data was able to see the unprocessed data, and only the right people are able to there's a process for signing off if you want to change the prompt that processes this data, right? They were able to build a validation tool about this that allowed people to review the exact processing that's what's happening, and with context and all that sort of thing, right? And they kind of like realized that again, it wasn't about the model in the middle. Maybe that would even a little bit better, right? The off-the-shelf point might have been a little bit better. Who knows? We didn't get that far down the line because it was all the other stuff, right? There was the fact, okay, we can see for ourselves this works, but not only that, we can show this to our auditor, and they will be able to see that it works, right? And this and it air quotes, comes for free. It's just built into the platform. It's not something you have to design or think very careful about and all this sort of thing. You can just flip a switch and it works almost. No, there's a little bit of engineering around it, but it's a lot easier than sitting down, hands on keyboard, and designing this from the ground up.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Palantir was the most forward thinking on this area. I mean, we have things like markings when we're bringing in data assets where the team ingesting can put markings on the columns, and those markings can be removed in favor of restricted views back in the ontology, so you can implement row level security. Like having this built end to end, so there's a forward thought as to how do I engineer data in which there are security and access control concerns. I can restrict the views of those data, but the data engineering team can still make progress. And then how do I move that from the engineering phase to the application serving layer effectively? All of that's baked in there. Checks, having the ability to sort of align your SOC 2 processes with the platform and being able to track when security permissions are granted and why. Like, so many platforms don't even think about this stuff, right? And Palantir was decade ahead on all of this. And now, like with AI, all this stuff's become 10 times more important. And you can't actually effectively use AI unless you answer these questions. But one area in particular that I used to hate, and I think it's relevant today, is this, or at least in terms of the news last week around like the NPM supply chain attacks. But like Palantir, a lot of people to know this is like a restricted environment by default. Internet's off. Like you can't egress anything. You can't effectively talk to a web application anywhere. This is like the exact opposite of other platforms. Like a typical environment in AWS, unless you're setting this up in a private subnet, the typical environment is open to everything. And a lot of platforms are just by default open to everything. Today, like it feels like the attack vectors are just compounding. Last week, I don't know if you saw the news in NPM, there were these supply chain attacks whereby there were these scripts, install scripts that like went out and were like searching the user system for sensitive credentials or, crypto wallet information. And then they would like exfil that data out to a server, and then they could continue their attack vector, based on the information that they got. Open source is just this massive issue. And at least in Foundry, like when I'm working with open source, at least the internet's off by default, at least they have like some interesting protections they're putting in place on my behalf. But I'd be interested to get your thoughts on how is AI going to accelerate the threat vector here? Because from my perspective, AI coding tools are like, if they're capable of combining this sort of, let's find the secrets on the developer's machine. Let's find all the things within the environment that we can surface by getting these compromised packages in place. And then it could write a bunch of code based on that. Like it could figure out, okay, I found all these things. Let me write a new threat, write a new attack based on that and somehow get it to executing user machines. It feels like AI coding plus this is now like really accelerating the need for better security. But Martin, I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of have a habit of going into historical analogies here, I suppose, but everything old is new again, right? 20 years ago, you had a slight revolution in developer accessibility around the LAMP stack. So that's Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, and variations over that, stuff like that. And you had tons of people who were not like trained software engineers who could suddenly build a website, and they did, and they got hacked, right? I think we're going to see a similar thing with overeager vibe-coded apps. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think I saw something about that T app data spill about a month ago. Somebody suggested that is this whole thing just been vibe coded, that then they were actually did any kind of real security engineering on this thing. So I mean, I think if you vibe code something and you also don't know what you're doing, that's very rough phrasing. But security is hard, and if you don't know just at least a little bit about security and what to watch out for, and you vibe code an app and you put it in production, you're probably going to get hacked. And some people are going to need to learn the hard way that security is hard and you should do security well. Palantir has kind of been founded in the extreme opposite of that. Palantir has been incredibly, unbelievably paranoid about all things security from day one, and I think that has served Palantir extremely well. But yeah, no, Palantir has definitely been absolutely paranoid about this, and I know for certain that this exact type of supply chain attack was definitely on Palantir's radar 10, 15 years ago.
What's great is like maybe from me, Christine, and Nicole's role is that we don't have to worry about this as much, in the sense that like, oh, well, we get security baked into the cake when we're going to build something. And yeah, like maybe it's a pain in the ass when you have to add the right permissions between an object type and an action type. And you're like, why do I have to keep adding the right provisioned roles here? And that small give to have a secure platform building mission critical applications for a business's supply chain that might, if failed or attacked, could have serious ramifications on a company's bottom line. Yeah, that feels pretty good to be able to deliver that, as opposed to like, here's some rinky dink vibe coded application that, by the way, might completely disrupt your company's operations.
Yeah, it feels pretty good when we're filling out client security forms, being like, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? Yes, we get it from Foundry. Yes, we get it from Foundry. It's very great. But one thing I will say on sort of like how far ahead this is, and I'm no like technological economist or anything, I don't know how anybody else can catch up. It just because it's just this kernel from the very, very, very beginning of the early days of Gotham that this has spawned, and now every step along the way, every new product iteration, it's just been more and more baked in, and that's 20 years and billions of dollars into platform security. I think it's just given, I just think it's I don't think anybody's going to catch up at any time in the foreseeable future, I think.
Hey guys, this is Connor from the Code and Connor podcast. I hope you're enjoying the episode. I want to make sure you know about the first ever Palantir user conference, FutureOps. It's in Dallas, Texas from October 22nd and 23rd. If you are a Palantir user, a company that invests in Palantir technologies, investors that follow the companies that serve in this ecosystem, or investors that follow Palantir, you absolutely have to be at this event. It's going to be a fun time. We're going to learn a lot. We're going to see amazing applications of the technology, and we'll trade ideas and network. We hope to see you there. Dorian's got an article coming out about the Codepocalypse that might happen to companies who aren't considering security.
Yeah, it's not just security. I mean, like, there's laws of software evolution in play here. Like the most basic one being like the more code we add, the harder it becomes to add more code. Complexity emerges in these systems, and they push back on progress. And the last thing you want to do is like accelerate beyond human ability to comprehend the changes being made and ability to rein that back in through AI code generation tools. Like these tools are more than capable of spitting out so much code that eventually progress grinds to a halt. No one knows how the code base works anymore, and you just go and rewrite it from scratch. And that is the actual natural evolution I've seen on human timescales that occur about year 5 of a startup. They reach this wall of evolution where they're like, why can't we make any more progress? Like, I just want to change the button color. Like, why can't I change the button color? Like, you're telling me I can't change the button color? And like the engineers are like, well, it's complicated, you know? And this happens all the time, but now it won't take 5 years, it'll take 5 months, you know?
Yeah.
And
Ironically, we used Apollo to literally change the button color when we were doing the Aegis next generation Aegis demonstration and using Apollo for CI/CD for the Navy. Changing a button color on a Navy display in near real time is no small feat.
That's rough. That's rough. But yeah, so I wrote an article about this. I think that Palantir's thinking about these things too. They are continuing to evolve the product on the security front as well. But like, I feel like they're trying to provide more tools that let you manage the ontology at scale, which is super important. It's kind of going to play into this. They're working on their own AI FDE engineering tools that will, you know, if successful, also accelerate the amount of stuff that enters Foundry. And Foundry is not immune to this. Like, the more modules I add, the more ontology objects I add, the harder it becomes to maintain that system as the interconnectivity among these things start to play out. They released a new product recently that I find super valuable. I'm spacing on the name, but it's Cameron Kahn's team. His team did Pipeline Builder, but also released this new product that lets you do traceability in the permissions of your app and sort of like, here are all the actions and things that represent your app. You can go in and like test permissioning. I think these kinds of tools are super valuable as we scale. We're going to need more of these kinds of things. But I'm interested in what they come up with around this, like ontologies for ontologies. I've seen that some customers, they have an ontology for the ontology tool because they've got like 1,500 objects in their ontologies. You know, like no one human can wrap their brain around 1,500 objects and like how they relate and where they're used. And like, so I think more of this meta kind of stuff about the platform is going to be valuable, especially as AI coding tools proliferate. It's not the same challenge as software evolution, but it is sort of. I mean, it's definitely in that vein. It's just a little different than maybe a single code base. You have this platform problem that you have to manage. You know, so I think this will be something for the future where if they innovate, they'll have a tremendous advantage. You know, like because the alternative version of using what Palantir is creating to help you manage these things is the enterprise rolling their own, and I'm very skeptical that they're up to that challenge, especially in the AI era.
They certainly try, though. We've seen a lot of clients are like, well, we're just going to stack 50 different pieces of technology together. It's like, guys, Palantir already did this for you. This feels like a, buy versus build. I know there's, you do your assessment, but a lot of times, like, let the technology company who's focused on this for 25 years step in here to help you because, man, is it a tough journey to try and build something like Foundry on your own?
I think the AI strategy too of all these companies needs to accept the fact that there's a lot of key pillars we've touched on, like related to the knowledge base, model grounding, security and access provisioning. Like there's all these key ones. As part of a successful strategy, you're also going to need to figure out like how does my company operate at a scale that's kind of unimaginable in terms of content creation, and like that content might be special offers AI is generating to go out and present to your users. It might be new articles. It might be changes to your knowledge base. It could be code-based changes to your code, your Foundry stack. All of this is going to scale massively. And we all need to start thinking about like, well, what are the right frameworks, methodologies, and platforms that can manage that? And it's going to be way beyond anything you can do in a spreadsheet. Like it's already beyond anything in a spreadsheet, but wait till the amount of that goes 100x of where it is today. And so, yeah, I think that Palantir's role in this and their ability to make every part of Foundry that exists today more valuable, like 10 times more valuable, has never been better, because they are starting 10 years ahead of where everyone else is at.
Christine, Nicole, I wonder if you guys can touch on like the growth of complexity on large clients that you've worked on. Like, yeah, first use case, knock it out of the park. Everything's great. It's in production. It's scaled across multiple plans from its inception to like where it is today. But that's like one use case. And when you get to 2, 5, 10, and, how are you helping strategize with clients or help them strategize with managing that complexity?
Often within a use case, taking that use case to sort of the next abstraction level, right? So how can you be working on the fifth or sixth use case and start showing them, well, if we pull from these other use cases that are already deployed and we start creating global objects, how can that benefit? But and I'm just thinking of an example where this particular client invests through business units. It's almost like you've got to prove the enterprise value at the unit level and then kind of do your selling from there. And I'm wondering if Christine or Martin have any examples where it's more enterprise, like there's an enterprise fund, because it's depends where you're working in the business. And that's a tough call, right? Because you want to coach them, and we do all the time. We try to explain the value of bringing up your ontology to a global level, leveraging it more smartly. But if you're funding and building and being held accountable at the unit level, it's hard to convince the enterprise to do something.
We work with so many different sort of flavors of clients. So one of them is, just these enormous enterprises. Some are enormous sort of corporations. Some are, more product focused. So, where they're actually more in kind of startup mode, building out a new product or an idea, and they are working to sell this product to multiple different types of entities. And so I think what happens a lot with that is, what does that business model look like? Because our teams are actually engaged with building the product, and then they go out and kind of with each of the potential customers do sort of bespoke work to help them get it integrated into their environment. So, what does that business model look like? How does it scale? We have another customer who we're working with. We just built out an MVP with them. He's super excited about it. He wants to create a business, opportunity around that. So we're going to come in as a strategic partner with him to figure out how to scale that across, multiple users, multiple clients. We have another project that Martin was just engaged in with a, insurance company where, he's got these deadlines. He wants more workflows. And I, got on the phone call with him and just said, how are things going? Like, where are you in kind of your journey with Foundry? And he was like, I don't know. Like, I know what I've done with you guys and it's cool and amazing, but I don't know what to do next. And I don't know how to bring in the right stakeholders. I don't know what type of workflows that I should start thinking about. And, so I actually, brought in Martin and said, let's kind of set up a strategy call and help you strategize on how to do this. And, Martin, I think, had 2 or 3 engagements with him and some of his senior engineers and a couple of our engineers to figure out the strategy of this. Because I think, so much of this goes so far beyond like the tech, like building out a workflow into, how do we really scale across organizations? And it's something that we've been sort of iterating on together is how can we provide more value to our customers beyond like, let's have Martin and some of our brilliant engineers who have built Skywise in the past, like take their lessons learned. How can we actually come up with some, ability? And we don't want to be consultants, but how do we come up with some ability to really figure out how to get the best use out of the platform? Because, they're all getting like somewhere between 10 and 40% out of the platform. Nobody's getting 100%.
Yeah, strategy always feels like a nuisance while you're trying to get the innovation built until it's not, right? The extensibility of object types. We see this all the time. If you're a Palantir customer right now and this is happening, call someone in this room. You have the same freaking ontology built like 5 different times. The same object types for the same representation of plant or customer or some type of procurement function, whatever it is, replicate it again and again. Then you're like, well, I have linters, so I can clean it up. You're like, well, okay. Or you can pay more consultants or Palantir to clean it up. You're like, or you can like take a freaking breath and think about the strategy associated with your ontology such that maybe you don't end up with replications, because a redundant object type creates 2 sources of truth, which means downstream applications might be inconsistent, but you're also paying for the pipelines to generate the same damn thing over and over. And then the maintenance and the people costs associated with managing 2 different pipelines. The cost associated with not focusing on strategy is bigger than people think.
Contrast, and like the FDE model, with the let's go find a user, go solve a problem, go find a user, go solve a problem, in a way, like kind of can create some of these like alternative ontologies. So there's this mode that has to augment the FDE model, which is also like, let's also have a strategy. Let's do really good forward deployed engineering in a way that's moving us towards an end state that's going to be scalable and sustainable.
I think one of the challenges is also about that we're still not entirely broken free of the old ways of thinking about software, which is you build one product, you deploy the one product, you train your users on the one product, and then you go back and then you do it again. So I think one of the things that you can do and should do, and many people end up doing, but it's not obvious from the beginning, is that once you have built a coherent application that does one thing with an ontology behind it that has been validated and is correct and coherent and linked in all the interesting ways, that look at that and say, okay, what else can I do with this ontology? Not the application, the ontology, right? Because, and this is, everybody who's worked at Palantir will roll their eyes, this is compounding. That was a word that was kind of a slogan at Palantir for several years at least. But there's some fundamental, there's a lot of fundamental truth in it. It's that once you've built this ontology once, you now have your ontology, and building the second application that uses 80% of that ontology but does something slightly different for a different user group is now not a 6-month project. It's now a 1-month project, maybe, right? One of the sales decks Palantir uses, or used at least in my time, had this kind of Gantt chart style timeline where the lines just kept getting smaller, right? Because when you're reusing your ontology, like we've talked about before, this kind of like painstaking work going plant to plant and validating this thing, right? This one application is not the only way inventory data is interesting for this corporation. It's definitely not. So, but the way they're a little bit thinking, and that goes back to this whole thing with being accountable at business units and all that kind of business complexity around it, strategy complexity around it. But it's like, we can do more with that ontology. There's going to be secondary adjacent use cases that can reuse that ontology and that we can build not in 6 months, but in a month or even 2 weeks, because that's what you can do with an ontology that already exists. So I think there's a little bit of kind of a mindset shift that needs to happen, where you realize just how much you can actually do once you've made this investment, instead of just going over and just as a new standalone unit, now we're building the next use case. That's, by the way, it's going to have its own ontology, which is going to replicate 3 objects because we can be bothered, right?
This is something I've been thinking about a lot, actually, and trying to find a good way to convey it to the people on the other side. I sort of landed on like ontology as a product and the need for like an ontology product management team, because what you're talking about is both a technical exercise and how do I design the ontology such that it can deliver those compounding use cases. And that has gotten a lot more complicated with the multimodal data plane where we're using virtual tables and linking back to storage systems like Snowflake and Databricks. But it's also more complicated now on the technical side because of ontology interfaces and shared property definitions. Like, what is the right way to give teams from a technical perspective the right amount of autonomy without causing ontology sprawl? Because we want to enable autonomy and teams to go out and build the use cases they want, but we don't want them to create ontology sprawl. A big part of that is the technical part of this ontology product management. The other is the strategy side, right? So it's like, well, if we design the ontology and phase its release in such a way that we deliver on the most high value use cases with the lowest build time and cheapest cost possible, well, that ontology product manager could actually do that, could figure out the phasing of the objects, when they're released, what use cases we build, when do we build the next ones, and continually align the shape of the ontology with the goals the business wants to achieve. So this is something I'm thinking a lot about. I don't know if the model's perfect. It's not, but it is something that I want to evolve over time. But I do think companies that are heavily invested in Palantir would benefit from this idea of an ontology product management team that sort of manages across the enterprise.
Yeah, I really like the idea of ontology as a product, and kind of one thing that I'm encouraging our implementation teams to do when they're doing very early stage work for some of our smaller customers that are using Foundry for the first time, and we're building out these first baby steps in the ontology world. Is like saying, okay, so now here you have an application, very 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 simple. Like we're a week, 2 weeks in, right? It has customer and the customer's orders and the order lines for the customer. Okay, fair enough, completely simple as standard stuff. Okay. Now I'm going to build you an application that starts with the order. So we start with the order, and now I can roll up to the customer and down to the order line. Took me 10 minutes. Good. I'm going to build another application where I start with the order line, and I kind of histogram how much product am I selling per order line, and then fall all the way down to the customer who are buying them. And the fact that I can just do those three, I can do the first one took longer because I needed to do the ontology, but the second two, 10 minutes each. Getting that idea in front of the customer very early, I think, goes. I mean, I'm not calling it ontology as a product because I hadn't thought of that, but I think that goes kind of in the same direction.
Yeah, it's trademark, so you're not allowed to use it without a fee.
It is not. It is not.
No pain.
That I was like encouraging everyone take that, Dave, because I want to see it actually become a thing. I'm just like, please, like, let's create
Make
this
it
role.
stick. I think that at enterprise, it kind of comes back to what I was saying before about show me, and deciding to like make an investment and dedicate resources, whether they're internal resources, third-party resources, Palantir resources, I don't care, to ontology as a product, is something that enterprises need to start thinking about and getting behind. I literally heard this week that that's a hard sell inside my company because it's not a use case. Yeah. And so I think as a collective, continuing to talk about the value and the importance, especially at large enterprise scale, of ontology as a product, ontology strategy, and all the ROI it generates for the two things that Connor said that it was problems for. That's a message I think we can all start. Just a drumbeat keep saying over and over again.
Well, thanks, guys. Today we covered trust and security in the AI age, what's driving success, including business alignment, security as a first principle, maniacal alignment with the business, and the benefits of using Palantir for enabling mission-critical applications and innovation. Christine, Nicole, Martin, thank you so much for your time spending it with us on the pod. Where can people find and reach out to Foxtrot?
Thank you so much. We love being here. So you can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on our website foxtrot-services.com, and we'd love to chat.
Well, guys, future episodes coming, more and more guests of partners, customers, content creators, Palantir, other tech companies, you name it. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.